The wind whispered through the broken towers of the moon fortress, carrying with it the scent of moss, rain, and something older, something that spoke of secrets long forgotten. Elara adjusted the strap of her satchel, feeling the weight of her books pressing against her chest. She had always been a scholar at heart, drawn to tales of the past, to stories that others dismissed as myths. And tonight, something had pulled her here, something she could not name, though it had begun as a soft humming in her mind, a melody only she could hear. The ruins were silent, save for the occasional crack of stone beneath her boots. Moonlight spilled across the jagged stones, painting them in shades of silver and shadow. Elara's breath rose in small clouds as she stepped carefully over fallen beams and shattered walls. The air seemed alive, almost waiting. She had read about this place in the oldest manuscripts. Once, a palace of the Alpha King, ruler of men and beasts alike. A king so powerful, his enemies had whispered that even death feared him. And yet, Elara muttered to herself, all that power could not save him. She paused, brushing her fingers along the edge of a crumbled pillar. A strange warmth lingered beneath her touch. Though the stone was cold, her heart skipped. Was it her imagination? Scholars often felt the pull of history too strongly, letting their own desires fill the gaps between fact and legend. But tonight, she could not convince herself that this was mere imagination. A shadow shifted behind her. She whirled, clutching her satchel like a shield. But there was nothing. Only moonlight, spilling across the ruins. She laughed nervously. It's just the wind. Only the wind, she whispered, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. She took another step and froze. The air grew heavy, dense, and electric. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement, a figure, tall and commanding, yet flickering, almost unreal. His eyes glowed faintly, like embers buried under centuries of ash. His presence made the shadows bend toward him, wrapping around his form like a cloak. Elara's breath caught. Who's there? She asked, though she already knew she might not receive an answer. The figure stepped closer, and the faint light revealed his face. Sharp, noble, haunted. His hair fell like dark waves, catching the silver of the moon. He was as if carved from both shadow and flame. His gaze locked with hers, and she felt it in her chest, a strange tug, like the pull of tides she had never learned to resist. My books say you're a ghost, she whispered, her voice barely carrying across the empty stones. The figure inclined his head slightly, and a slow, deep voice rumbled through the ruins, chilling and warm at the same time. And my soul says, you are mine. Elara stumbled backward, tripping over a fallen beam, her heart pounding as if it wanted to escape her chest. She tried to convince herself that he was a projection, a trick of moonlight and imagination. But the warmth of his gaze, the weight of his presence, told her otherwise. I don't understand, she stammered, gripping her satchel tightly. I shouldn't even be here. He stepped forward, and with each step, the shadows shifted and stretched, moving as if alive. No one comes here by accident, he said softly, almost tenderly. The ruins call you, Elara. And you answered. Elara froze. He knew her name. How could he know her name? Fear prickled at her spine, but beneath it was something else. A dangerous curiosity she could not resist. I don't understand. Why me? She whispered, her voice shaking. He knelt, though even kneeling he was impossibly tall, and his hand hovered over hers without touching. Because, he said, voice trembling like a distant drum, you are the first living soul who does not flee from me, the first who sees me, not as a shadow of fear, but as someone waiting. Ilara's mind raced. Waiting? For centuries, stories said, he had been cursed. trapped between life and death. And now, here he was, a presence more solid than she expected, and yet undeniably otherworldly. She wanted to step back, to run. But something rooted her to the spot. A strange magnetism. A pull that felt older than the ruins themselves. "I should leave," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "I shouldn't." Before she could finish, a chill swept through the ruins, sudden and violent. The moonlight flickered, as if someone had drawn a veil across it. The ground trembled beneath her feet, tiny cracks forming along the stone floor. She looked down and saw a faint glow seeping through the cracks, crawling like living fire across the stones. He extended his hand toward her. "Do not fear it," he said. "It is not mine. Not yet." Ilara hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but curiosity and awe held her in place. Slowly, she placed her hand over his. Heat flared from the touch, and her vision blurred. For a moment, the ruins seemed to vanish, replaced by visions she did not understand. Battles, thunder, loyalty, betrayal. Centuries of grief and rage, frozen in time, rushed past her senses. When she pulled her hand back, she was trembling. What are you?" "I am Kalen," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of ages. "Once king, once protector, now a soul tethered to ruins and regret. I am the Alpha King, though death has tried to claim me." Ilara's mind struggled to absorb his words. A king, a ghost, and now, standing before her, more real than any story she had ever read. "You've been cursed," she said softly, almost more to herself than to him. "To linger here, unseen by the world, trapped between." Kalen's eyes darkened, and a shadow flickered across his face. "Yes, the sorceress who envied my crown bound me to this fate. She said no living heart would ever bind to mine, that I would fade, forgotten, until the last stone of my fortress crumbled." Ilara's heart ached for him. The centuries of loneliness, the longing he carried it, wrapped around her chest like a winter wind. "And yet, you speak to me. You look at me, like I matter." He knelt lower, almost to the ground, and the shadows around him softened. "Because you do. You anchor me, Ilara, even if you do not yet understand it." The air shifted again, and she sensed that the ruins themselves were aware of her presence. Small stones rolled. Faint whispers echoed in corners where no one had been. The wind carried a warning, but also an invitation. Stay. Learn. Be part of what has slept for centuries. Ilara took a deep breath. Her rational mind screamed at her to turn away, to retreat to the safety of her books and the warmth of the village beyond the hills. But something deeper, a thread she could not name, pulled her forward. "Then, tell me," she whispered. "Tell me your story. Show me what has been lost." Kalen's eyes softened. He extended his hand fully now, and she placed hers in it, allowing the warmth to flow through her. With a gentle pull, he lifted her closer, and together they walked deeper into the ruins, where the walls still held echoes of songs, laughter, and sorrow. He spoke of battles waged and crowns stolen, of loyalty and betrayal, of a kingdom that had loved him once and feared him later. Ilara listened, absorbing each word like sunlight through fog. She felt herself drawn into his world, not as a scholar observing history, but as a participant, a witness to something almost sacred. Hours passed like minutes. The moon climbed higher, casting silver upon broken stones. And then, Kalen paused at the edge of a shattered balcony, overlooking the valley. Below, the mist swirled like smoke, hiding what was real from what was imagined. He turned to her, his voice low, almost a prayer. Do you believe in ghosts, Ilara? She swallowed hard. I think I do. Because I feel you. And I think you feel me too. A faint smile touched his lips. And for the first time, Ilara saw a spark of something human. Longing. Hope. Perhaps even love. But before she could speak again, the ground beneath them trembled violently. A deep rumble echoed through the fortress, and cracks appeared along the stones at their feet. Light spilled from below, a strange sigil glowing in the ancient stone, as if awakened by their presence. Kalen's eyes widened. "It has noticed you," he whispered, voice tight with warning. Ilara's heart raced. "Noticed me?" "The curse," he said, his gaze hardening. "And now, it stirs." Ilara looked down at the glowing sigil and felt a cold dread settle over her chest. Yet, despite the fear, despite the warnings of her mind, she felt a spark of something daring, something brave. She was part of this now, for better or worse. Kalen reached for her hand again, and she did not pull away. And in the moonlit ruins, with shadows twisting like living things around them, Ilara understood that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The fortress trembled once more, and somewhere deep below, a darkness stirred, aware, patient, and hungry. To be continued. The morning sun barely pierced the ruins of the moon fortress, casting long, pale beams across shattered stones and twisted vines. Ilara sat on the edge of a broken balcony, her hands pressed against the warmth of the sigil still faintly glowing on her palm. She could still feel the power that had stirred in the ruins. A trembling presence that whispered warnings only she could hear. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional cry of a distant crow. She turned toward Kalen, who sat nearby, his shadow long against the crumbling walls. He looked different in daylight. Not ghostly, not distant, but more real than she had ever imagined. Yet, there was still something in him that was untouchable, a weight that spoke of centuries of pain, loss, and regret. "You should not have stayed last night," Kalen said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "The curse, it senses you now. It knows your heart." Ilara swallowed hard. "I could not leave. I had to know you, to understand." Kalen's eyes softened as he looked at her. "And that is why I am drawn to you. Not just because you are alive, but because you do not fear me. You do not treat me as a story, or a warning. You see me, as I am." Her heart fluttered. She wanted to speak, to tell him that the pull she felt was more than curiosity, that it had been there, from the moment she had first seen him. But the words died in her throat, replaced by a knot of fear. The sigil burned faintly against her skin, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "The curse," she whispered. "What does it want?" Kalen rose slowly, the movement careful, deliberate. "It wants to consume me, Ilara. To take everything I am and erase it. And now, it wants you as well." His eyes darkened, a storm behind the calm. "The bond it senses between us. It feeds on it. It will not rest until one of us is gone, or until it has claimed both." Ilara's stomach twisted. Fear gripped her, but beneath it, a stubborn thread of determination sparked. "Then we fight it. Together." Kalen looked at her, a mixture of admiration and worry in his gaze. "You do not know what you ask. The curse is ancient. It is clever. It does not fight openly. It waits. It whispers. It twists your thoughts, your desires, your doubts, until you no longer know who you are or who you trust." She nodded, her jaw firm. "Then we will face it, but not with fear, with truth, with each other." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The fortress seemed to hold its breath. Then, as if answering her words, a cold wind swept through the ruins, carrying with it the faint scent of something dark and iron-like. Shadows shifted at the edges of the walls, moving with purpose. Kalen stood, his expression sharp. Ilara followed, her steps careful, her heart hammering. Together, they moved deeper into the fortress, through halls lined with shattered statues and broken mosaics. Each room they entered seemed to pulse with a memory, echoes of laughter, cries, and commands from centuries long past. As they reached the central hall, Kalen stopped. His hand hovered over a faded mural, showing a king standing against an army of shadows. "This was my kingdom," he said softly, "once full of life, once full of trust. Now, it is only memory and pain." Ilara reached out, touching his arm lightly. "Then let us bring life back to it. Let us turn memory into hope." Kalen looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something break through the centuries of sorrow. A flicker of hope, fragile, but persistent. Their moment was shattered by a sudden movement in the shadows. Ilara stepped back instinctively, and Kalen moved to stand in front of her. From the darkness, shapes emerged, flickering figures of smoke and shadow, formless but menacing. The curse had begun to hunt. Ilara felt a shiver run through her body as the shadows circled them. They whispered words she could not fully hear. A language older than kingdoms, older than time itself. Fear clawed at her chest, but she stood firm. Kalen raised his hand, and the air shimmered around him. The shadows recoiled, hissing like wounded animals. "Do not be afraid," he said. "They are dangerous, yes, but they cannot harm you while I am here." The figures paused, then advanced again, more boldly. Kalen's eyes flared with a strange light, and he moved with a grace that was both terrifying and beautiful. He seemed to command the shadows, bending them to his will, pushing them back. But they were persistent, relentless. Ilara watched, awe and fear mingling in her chest. She wanted to run, to hide, but she could not tear her eyes away. He was magnificent and tragic, a king without a throne, a soul without peace. Finally, the shadows scattered, retreating into the corners of the hall. Kalen lowered his hand, breathing heavily. "They will return," he said, "and stronger each time. The bond between us, it makes them bolder." Ilara stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "Then we must strengthen it, together." Kalen looked at her, and she saw the weight of centuries in his gaze. "You do not know what it costs," he said. "Every moment we are together, I risk losing you to the darkness. Every touch, every word, binds you to my fate." Her fingers tightened on his arm. "I am already bound," she whispered, "and I choose this." For the first time, Kalen smiled, faint but genuine. It was a smile that carried centuries of longing and pain, a smile that warmed her heart even in the shadowed hall. The following days were a mixture of study and vigilance. Ilara pored over the ancient texts she had brought, searching for any clue about the curse. She learned that it had been crafted by a sorceress jealous of Kalen's power, a woman whose bitterness had twisted the very essence of his soul. The curse fed on guilt, on fear, on the separation of hearts. Kalen trained her in the ways of focus and protection. Though she was mortal, he taught her to sense the energy around them, to recognize the whispers of the curse, and to ground herself in her own courage. Slowly, she began to feel the strange connection between them, the invisible thread that tied their hearts together. At night, they shared stories of loss and hope. Kalen spoke of his kingdom, the battles he had led, the friends he had lost. Ilara spoke of her quiet life, of books and study, of the longing she had felt for something greater than herself. Their words wove a tapestry of trust, binding them closer with every conversation. But the curse was patient. One evening, as the moon rose high, Ilara awoke to find Kaelin gone. Panic surged through her chest, and she ran through the ruins, calling his name. Shadows flickered around her, moving with a strange intelligence, guiding her steps. She found him at the edge of the central hall, kneeling before a dark pool of liquid shadows that swirled like a storm. His head was bowed, and his hands pressed against the floor as if trying to hold back the tide. "Kaelin!" she cried, running to him. He looked up, eyes wide and strained. "It tries to take me. Now. It knows your bond strengthens me, and it seeks to undo it." Ilara's hands found his shoulders. "Then we face it together. You are not alone." He shook his head. "If it touches you, it could destroy your soul. You must stay back." But she would not. She stepped forward, placing her hand over his, grounding him, anchoring him to the living world. Light flared around them, faint at first, then stronger. The shadows recoiled, hissing in fury. Kaelin gasped. "Ilara, your presence, it gives me strength. But you risk everything." "I choose to risk it," she said firmly. "I am not afraid." The shadows retreated slowly, as if repelled by the bond they had formed. But even as relief flooded them, the ground beneath the fortress trembled violently. Cracks spread through the stone, and a low rumble echoed in the halls. Kaelin's eyes widened. "It is gathering," he said. "The curse. It will not stop. It grows stronger. And soon, it will return, with a force we cannot yet face." Ilara felt a chill, but she also felt something else, something fierce and unyielding. They were bound together now, heart and soul, and whatever came, they would face it side by side. She looked into Kaelin's eyes, and he met her gaze without fear, only trust. In that moment, centuries of sorrow, longing, and pain seemed to melt into a single truth. They belonged together, even against the darkness. And yet, the fortress trembled again, deeper this time, as if the very foundations of the world were being tested. From the deepest shadows, a low, guttural sound emerged, something ancient, patient, and hungry. Kaelin's hand tightened around hers. "Prepare yourself, Ilara," he said, voice low and tense. "The curse is awakening fully, and it will come for you, for us, with everything it has." Ilara swallowed hard, but she did not step back. "Then, we face it," she whispered. Together, as they stood side by side in the ruins of the Moon Fortress, the shadows writhed in the corners, and the wind carried a promise of darkness to come. The bond between them had strengthened, but the curse had noticed, and it was hungry. The shadows rose like a storm around Ilara and Kaelin, filling the central hall of the Moon Fortress with darkness so thick it seemed to swallow the moonlight. The figure at the heart of the shadow mass was colossal, its eyes glowing molten gold, its form constantly shifting, like smoke wrapped around stone. It moved with purpose, and the air trembled with its anger. Ilara's heart raced, but she did not step back. She felt Kaelin's hand grasp hers, warm and solid, despite the cold shadow pressing around them. "We face it together," he said, voice steady, though his eyes betrayed centuries of fear. The figure let out a sound that shook the bones of the fortress, a roar that carried both warning and hunger. Kaelin stepped forward, his presence blazing with power, his eyes glowing like embers. "You cannot have her," he shouted, his voice echoing off the ruined walls. The shadow lunged, and Kaelin met it, his hand raised, pushing against the darkness. Ilara felt a wave of cold and despair, but she held on to him, grounding him. letting her presence flow into him like sunlight through fog. The shadow hissed, twisting around them. But it could not touch her while she held Kaelin's hand. The bond they had forged, trust, courage, and love, created a shield stronger than the shadow had expected. "You anchor me," Kaelin whispered, his voice trembling with effort. Elara nodded. "I do, and I will not let go." The shadow roared again and attacked, sending waves of darkness crashing through the hall. Stones broke, dust swirled, and the air vibrated with power. Kaelin pushed back, but the shadow was relentless. Each strike of darkness seemed to pierce through him, threatening to tear him apart. Elara felt a surge of fear but also determination. She realized something vital. The curse fed on guilt, regret, and the pain Kaelin had carried for centuries. It could only be destroyed if Kaelin faced his past, if he accepted his mistakes and forgave himself. "Kaelin," she shouted, "you must face it. You must tell it the truth of who you are." He hesitated, pain and doubt flickering across his face. The shadow twisted faster, wrapping around him like a serpent. I cannot," he cried. "I have failed too many. I am unworthy." Elara stepped closer, her voice firm. "No, you are not unworthy. You have loved, protected, and endured more than any soul should. The curse wants you to believe you are alone, but you are not. I am here." Her words pierced the darkness. Kaelin took a deep breath, closing his eyes, letting her strength flow into him. He began to speak not to her, not even to the shadow, but to himself. He spoke of every failure, every loss, every betrayal he had carried, the guilt that had chained him to the ruins for centuries. "I was weak when I should have been strong. I lost those I loved. I failed my kingdom, but I will not fail again. Not now, not her." As he spoke, the bond between them flared like moonfire, bright and blinding. The shadows screamed, twisting and contorting, trying to resist the light. But the power of truth, of courage, of love shared between them, was stronger. Elara stepped closer, placing both hands over his, and together, they let their hearts speak in silence, a language older than words. The fortress shook, dust falling from the ceilings, stones splitting, but the light between them grew, filling the hall with warmth and brilliance. The shadow shrieked one final time and then shattered, scattering into 1,000 fragments that evaporated like smoke in sunlight. The roar faded, leaving only the distant cry of crows and the whisper of wind through broken stone. Kaelin sank to his knees, exhausted, his body trembling. Elara knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around him. "You did it," she whispered. "It's over." He looked at her, eyes shining with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We did it. Together," he said, voice low, barely audible. You saved me, Elara, not just from the curse but from myself." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not of sorrow, they were of triumph, of relief, of something deeper she had never known. She rested her forehead against his. "We saved each other," she said softly. The ruins around them seemed to breathe, as if acknowledging the end of the ancient curse. The broken walls glimmered faintly in the dawn light, and the air, once heavy with despair, felt lighter, almost alive. Kaelin rose slowly, and Elara helped him stand. His hand brushed hers, and she felt a warmth, not from the sun, but from him. He was no longer a ghost, no longer tethered to shadows. He was whole, and for the first time in centuries, he felt the pulse of life, of freedom, of hope. But the cost of the battle was clear. Stones lay shattered, walls cracked, and the fortress, though alive with memory, was broken. Kaelin looked at the ruins, a shadow of grief crossing his face. "My kingdom," he whispered. "It is gone. All I have are memories. And you." Alara squeezed his hand. Then we will build again. Not just the walls, but the future. Together. He looked at her, eyes softening, a smile touching his lips. I have waited centuries for someone who would see me. Not the legend, not the curse, but me. And I found you. Her heart swelled. I was never afraid of you, she said. I only feared a world without you. The bond between them was more than survival, more than magic. It was trust. It was understanding. It was love, forged in darkness and tempered by fire. They stood side by side, knowing that nothing could break what they had built together. Yet, even in victory, the world beyond the ruins awaited. The High Council and the remnants of the kingdom would not remain idle. They would see Kaelin's return as a threat, as a danger. The past was not fully healed, and the crown he had lost still called to him, though now he held something far more precious. Alara's trust and heart. Kaelin, she said softly, the world may not understand us, but it cannot take away what we share. We have faced death, shadows, and time itself, and we survived. He nodded, his hand brushing a lock of her hair from her face. A distant sound echoed through the valley below, the faint cry of an army, banners waving, soldiers moving. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. The kingdom. It awakens. They will come. Alara looked at him, unafraid. Then let them come. We are ready. He smiled, a smile that carried centuries of sorrow, hope, and now joy. With you, I am ready for anything, he said. The wind blew through the ruins, carrying the scent of rain and earth, of life renewed. The fortress, though broken, seemed to pulse with a quiet strength, a reminder that even in ruin, there could be beauty. Kaelin turned to Alara, his eyes deep, unwavering. Alara, will you stay with me? Not just in these ruins, not just through shadows, but beyond. Will you be my queen, my equal, my anchor? Ilara's heart leapt. Yes, she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. He took her hands, lifting them to his lips. The bond between them, forged in darkness, strengthened in trust, and tempered by love, glowed faintly around them. They did not need words now. The truth of their hearts spoke for them. The sun rose higher, casting light across the ruins. The shadows that had haunted the fortress for centuries were gone, leaving only the memory of their struggle and the promise of a new beginning. Kaelin and Alara stood together, looking out over the valley, the future uncertain but theirs to shape. For the first time in centuries, Kaelin felt the weight of the crown less than the weight of her hand in his. He was free, not just from the curse, but from the past that had bound him. And as they stood there, hearts intertwined, the wind carried a whisper, not of darkness, but of hope. A kingdom could rise again, but more importantly, two souls had found each other, stronger than legend, stronger than time. Alara leaned against Kaelin, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. The ruins around them glimmered in the morning light. And for the first time, the moon fortress felt alive, not as a place of fear, but as a place of memory, love, and rebirth. The curse was broken. The shadows were gone, and two hearts, once separated by centuries of fear and sorrow, had found each other in the ruins of a forgotten kingdom. Alara whispered, "We survived." Kaelin pressed his forehead to hers. "Yes," he said softly. "And now, we live." The wind carried their promise across the valleys, over the hills, and through the empty ruins. A new chapter had begun. Not of legends, not of shadows, but of life, love, and hope. Together, they walked from the ruins, hand in hand, into a world waiting for them, ready to be shaped by two hearts that had conquered centuries of darkness. And somewhere, deep in the echoes of the fortress, The first light of dawn touched the stones, as if the world itself blessed the bond they had forged.